So the thing that I specialize in, if you will, is the democratization of the workplace. How can you take the things that you would normally expect and place on just a single human being and distribute not only the authority, but the accountability as well into structures so that it's no longer a single, what is that phrase, like a single neck to choke or whatever? I think it's a horrible
A
phrase.
single neck to
Um,
choke. Wow.
yeah,
Sounds
corporate
aggressive.
speak. Exactly.
Hey, I'm Armando Leduc, producer, film actor, and owner of Leduc Entertainment. I've chosen a life off the beaten path and wanted to find others that are doing the same. Spaghetti on the Wall is a show based on all of the years that I've thrown spaghetti on the wall and nurtured what stuck. We will share fun stories, ideas, tips, tricks, and more. Welcome to Spaghetti on the Wall.
What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Spaghetti on the Wall. We really enjoy everybody that tunes in to listen. Try to bring that value. And today we've got Melissa Boggs, who's a consultant, a public speaker, and she's going to talk about what she does and how she markets and how she does what she does. And we're going to get into the nitty gritty. So welcome, Melissa Boggs. How are you?
Hi, Armando. I'm well. Good to meet you. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you as well. I'm going to take these off now that I know that we're recording and sounding good. So sweet deal. So you're a consultant. How long have you been a consultant?
I actually prefer to say I'm a coach simply
Okay.
because I kind of do a little bit of both, but I definitely take a coaching perspective on anything that I do when I'm working with folks. I have been a coach for the better part of 8 years, 9 years. I have been in business for myself doing that for about a year and a half.
Cool. What's the difference between a consultant and a coach?
So, more or less, a consultant has, and I don't say this in any sort of negative way, a consultant generally has an agenda. Usually, a consultant is very specifically attuned to a specific methodology or model or framework or way of working or whatever it might be that you've hired them for, and they are trying to teach you to that thing.
Right.
I do have a set of principles that I operate by, but a coach is trying to help you find the answers within yourself. So I
Mm.
go into a situation with a client expecting that they know better than I do, but they may just be having a hard time, like, unleashing that or untangling it from inside themselves. And so I'm taking more of a coaching stance in asking them the right questions and helping them to get to that answer themselves.
What was your spaghetti on the wall moment? Meaning, how did you know that this was the thing that you wanted to do?
So I it was very gradual and incremental, my career. So I actually started out, I'd say now about 15 years ago, in agile software development, not as a developer, but as what we would call a scrum master or an agile coach. And I worked with teams to help them figure out their team dynamics and figure out how to be more nimble as a team and how to work together and communicate and all of those things. And that sort of bled into doing a lot of leadership coaching because teams can't really be effective or as effective as they could be without supported leadership and leadership that connects with what they're trying to do. And so now I tend to do this one on one coaching to help those leaders support the people that I used to be, if that makes sense.
Makes sense.
Um, yeah, I have a lot of empathy and sympathy for the folks who are in the shoes that I was in 15 years ago. And so I try to be the leader that I wish I had, or and sometimes I did have actually. I was quite lucky in some cases, or help other leaders be the leaders that their teams need them to be. And that's what I speak on as well, is just different ways of working and different ways of leading in today's environment as opposed to even 5 years ago. Like everything has changed in the past 5 years.
Sure has. What is your claim to fame?
My claim to fame is that I was the co-CEO of Scrum Alliance, which is the largest Agile association. We had a global membership of over 1 million members and a staff of 50 to 60 that were amazing people. And so my claim to fame was the title, but more than that, there was a lot of work that we did within the organization that was cutting edge and trying new stuff as a company internally that just got a lot of attention because we were, again, like trying to push the boundaries of what work looks like.
Do you have any regrets?
Everybody says like, oh, I have no regrets. And I think that is like such a load of bull sometimes because I get the sentiment that we learn from everything that we do. Excuse me, that we learn from everything that we do. But, we all either make mistakes or miss opportunities. So do I have any regrets? I don't know if I could give you a specific example, but I will say, I think any time that I didn't speak up when my intuition was telling me something, I ended up falling into some sort of regret because my intuition is very strong and usually right. And, as a woman in our society, and I actually grew up in a fairly religious background, I was sort of sometimes taught not to trust that or not to speak up or say anything. And more often than not, when I didn't, I was right and I could have prevented harm or hurt or whatever it might be. So yeah, I have those regrets for sure.
You got any nicknames? People call you anything?
So in high school soccer, there were 3 Melissas on our team. And it was kind of comical because you'd have these moments, especially one of the others, where we actually like played on the same side. And so our coaches would say something like, Melissa, back off, and we would both back off. So they came to me and they said, you have a choice. You can be called Shorty or Squirt. What do you prefer? You can imagine what I chose. And so from that point on, I was known as Shorty, and that was probably my sophomore year. And I still have some of the same group of friends from that time.
Right.
So that was a girls' soccer team, but of course there was like a brother boys soccer team. All of them called me Shorty. I think there were friends of mine that got to like senior year of high school that might not have actually known my real name. Those folks still call me that. I am 42 years old.
I'm
And
42 as well.
still, some of those folks, hey.
When's your birthday?
Still call me Shorty. November 9th.
Okay, January 15th. So you just turned 42.
Ooh, I just turned 42. Yeah, this
Right
feels
on.
like a big year. I love this number. The answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Oh, that's right. Huh.
Yeah.
It was good. It was a good year. I will say 42 was a good year. I'm about to be 43 though. So
Getting close.
yes, it's getting close.
Make the most of the rest of it here.
100%.
So Shorty, I also often get Mel, short for Melissa.
Mel and Shorty. Cool.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything like super unique though.
What's your vision for your future and for your business, and how do you guys stay? Do you have a team?
I don't. It's just me and my husband. Occasionally, he does like auto editing, so he helps with the podcast, but that's it.
So how do you stay focused on your vision? What is your vision, and how do you stay focused on it?
So my mission is to change the way that we think about work by planting seeds. And so for me, that means the one-on-one coaching I do. It also means the speaking that I do, even if I can just affect, 1 or 2 people to think differently about our social hierarchies at work, things like that, then I've accomplished my mission. It's not hard for me to stay focused on that, if I'm being honest, because I've basically been obsessed with it for 20 years.
Nice.
I was very fortunate that my very first job or my first big girl job, as I call it, out of retail and into sort of the office, was for a company that was one of the best places to work year after year after year. And they were incredibly employee focused. We had a say in things. I mean, it was just an amazing place to work. And I was there for 12 years. I grew up there. And so when I left and like went on to other companies and realized how unusual that was and how special it was, I just kind of became obsessed with helping companies be better and be better for their employees so that their employees can be better for them. So yeah, it's not hard because it's basically all I think about when it comes to work.
Yeah, it makes sense. So talk to me about this social hierarchy idea and concept.
Sure. So the thing that I specialize in, if you will, is the democratization of the workplace and non-hierarchical organizational structures. How can you take the things that you would normally expect and place on just a single human being, like a manager or a CEO, and distribute not only the authority, but the accountability as well into structures so that it's no longer like a single, what is that phrase, like a single neck to choke or whatever. I think it's a horrible
A
phrase.
single neck to
Um,
choke. Wow.
yeah,
Sounds
corporate
aggressive.
speak. Exactly. But rather it's, how do you get people aligned to a mission and, excited for how they are serving their customers and then build structures that, again, like create that authority and accountability together. And so you see, you see these social hierarchies in the workplace, not just the obvious ones like manager, director, VP, but even well, I'm more senior to you because I've been here for 10 years. Sure, but I just came in with brand new ideas that could really shake up the entire company.
Right.
But you're the new guy. I mean, there's all of these like implied hierarchies that we don't even recognize or acknowledge that could either make or break us. Like, I'm not saying that all hierarchies are bad, but we have to actually recognize them and then sort of use them for good or get rid of them because they're not serving us. So, social hierarchies in the workplace.
I like that concept. We've been doing a morning meeting for the last 2 weeks, and it was nothing. We had been doing meetings here and there, but this is the first time we've implemented sort of a morning meeting where everybody that's part of the organization is in the meeting, and it's like I think it's been transformative. Wouldn't you say, Ethan? It's just been. I think the culture is now starting to come out. You know. And along with what you're talking about, I think that as a group, we're now taking responsibility for different aspects of the business, not just, falling on one person. It's like, the accountability is now, 2 or 3 people and creating that. So I'm curious to know, how are you implementing the strategies?
Sure. So there are a number of different frameworks that people tend to rely on. There are what you would hear called Agile frameworks. So there's Scrum and there's Kanban. There's these like different cadences and like ways of working. And then there are bigger ones that are intended to apply to the entire organization, like holacracy, sociocracy. There's one called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. And I decided quite a while ago to not tie myself to one in particular. So, for example, at Scrum Alliance, even though literally like our whole thing was education of Scrum, Scrum was not the only thing that we relied upon for our organizational structure and systems. I pulled from all kinds of different, the ones I just named. And so for me, I actually help organizations kind of focus on the principles, like what are your business goals? What is standing in the way of you right now? And then here's like 4 or 5 principles that would actually help you kind of get in that direction. And those principles might be, self-organization, accountability and authority. Decision making is a really big one in organizations. It's like people make a lot of assumptions that the leaders are going to make the decisions, but that slows everyone else down. So when we have really explicit conversations about what are the boundaries of our decision making, can we as a team make this decision? When do you, the leader, need to be brought in? And oftentimes they're surprised, more or less, when the leader's like, no, I don't need to be a part of that decision. You are closer to the work than I am. You make that decision.
Hallelujah.
When they may have been sitting there waiting for the leader this whole time. And so
I
it's
feel
funny
like
because it's not,
sometimes, yeah, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I would say it's just not as like some of these solutions or strategies are not as complex as we think. Sometimes it is very, very simple that we are having a misunderstanding or making assumptions, and that is actually what's slowing us down, not a lack of goals or, some complex structure. It's simply like we need to have a frank conversation in a safe way to get us to a place where people can move. And that's really my goal is like make it to where people can move. I just sort of oversimplified it, but that's it.
No, I know it's definitely extremely nuanced. I find some of the challenges with my own organizations and employees when I try to empower them to make the decisions and be okay with making mistakes and knowing that, if they do make a mistake, it's not because it's not because they, were malicious and in the intent. They were just trying something out and it didn't work. And I'm totally okay with that, but I feel like sometimes they don't necessarily want to get the reprimanding of being wrong, right? And so therefore they're not making the decision to try something out, right? And I think part of that has to do with personality traits. I've been getting really big into the DISC profile. You familiar?
I am. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's funny, like, I made my employees take the assessment, and so now in these groups, we're trying to understand our personalities a little bit more. I'm a D personality, so I'm not necessarily so touchy-feely and people oriented in that respect. And I'm like, I'm super impulsive. I need, things done, and I don't necessarily need to know all of the details in order to get it done. But, I have people on my staff that are S and C personality types that are like really just about the details and about the process and things like that. And I am now, because I know those things, am more understanding of that personality type and understanding how that can benefit my business as a result, right? Because if we had a bunch of me's running around, it would not be a good thing. I can promise you that, right? So I think
Sure.
there's a place for everyone, But to your point, I think that communication and being frank, but in an environment that is soft and welcoming and okay, so that they can come in and understand that you are, yes, please make the decision. I don't care if it's, black pens to blue pens, like whatever, make the decision. Like I don't need to be involved in every single aspect of the decision-making process. And it's okay if a mistake is made, so, would love to know how, are you creating sort of role-playing scenarios where, how are you creating those environments to make it more of a free and open line of communication where people feel free to express themselves, but not to the point where it gets so cumbersome in a conversation where we leave, where we leave the conversation not having an implementation strategy, right? Like it becomes sort of a bitch fest, and it's like, great, that was a great bitch fest, but now, like, where are we, here? Like how? So I guess it's a two-part question. How do you create that environment, and then how do you create action items so that you can actually implement the strategies you guys have come up with in that session?
So my short answer is I don't. Because the majority of the work I do is one-on-one leadership coaching with the leader themselves. And so what I am doing is helping them to figure out how to do that. And here's why. And maybe this is another difference between a consultant and a coach as well. Again, never throwing shade on consultants. It's so important. It's just a different perspective than I take. Oftentimes, if you, the consultant, come in and do that work that you just described, when you walk out the door 6 months and hundreds of thousands of dollars later, that work goes out the window because you haven't actually changed the dynamics that were important to change, which more often than not was between the leader and the team. And so the perspective that I take and the stance that I take is I'm going to work with you, the leader, and help you understand your impact on the team. Now, it doesn't mean I don't talk to the team ever, but I'm going to go back to you, even if I talk to the team, and I'm going to say, hey, here's what I'm hearing, here's what I'm observing. Oftentimes, leaders are not aware of their privilege. They are not aware of the power that they cannot get rid of. I actually want to come back to that in a second. And they're not aware of the positive impact that they can make, but it's often not overnight. Like you have to consistently show the team that it's okay to make mistakes.
Right.
You have to consistently show up for them when they do make a mistake or when they take a risk and it succeeds. Like make a really big deal about that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, like leaders often don't recognize. So I have a funny little story. So when I first walked into my role at Scrum Alliance, first time being a CEO, and I met with everyone in the company, like one-on-one over the course of several weeks. And I was probably 3 weeks into this series of conversations. And I sat down with this woman, Carol. I don't think she'll mind me mentioning her. Carol is a little bit older than me, has been in the workforce a little bit longer than me. And I'm talking to her and we're really hitting it off and like having a great conversation. And I said something that I had been saying to everyone prior to her, which is, I'm going to take off my CEO hat and put it right here. And I really want you to feel like you can, give me real feedback. Tell me how have things been for you and things like that. And she leans over very dramatically, to be honest, and I love her for this, puts her hand on my arm and says, sweetheart, no matter how hard you try, you cannot take off your CEO hat because no matter how kind and friendly you are, you sign my paycheck and you need to understand that. And I was floored. Like I sat back and was like, to that point, I'd been very much like, well, I'm different. I'm a different kind of CEO. And frankly, I was, but it was a huge eye opener for me to recognize that just like many of us with our middle class white privilege, like we can't put it down. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. I was always going to be wearing my CEO hat. So I had to be really aware of that power and how I wanted to either try to distribute it or just step back so that I'm not exuding power even when I don't want to. And so that is a conversation that I have with leaders all the time as well, is that it's not enough to say, you guys run with it, but here's my opinion. It's just an opinion. Any opinion that you have, and if you are in that role, is immediately going to be taken as some level of gospel, right? And so having that conversation with people so that they're aware of it. Sometimes if you name it, it can diminish it a little bit and you can say like, hey, I know I'm the CEO. I know I can't take my hat off, but I genuinely just want to share a little bit of my opinion, but you can take it or leave it and I'm going to walk away and you don't even have to respond. Sometimes it works a little bit, but they're still going to be like, well, she really liked that idea. And so that's something that I talk with leaders about a lot, is how they're showing up with their teams.
And so how do you show up? I think that's a big, all right, we're going to turn this into a therapy session. I definitely am aggressive, abrasive at times. It's only recently have I started to learn about, more of the vulnerability aspect of things, and not flying off the handle quickly, right? When things are not going well. how, and I guess it's just a coaching thing, right? I mean, it's just like being aware of and knowing your triggers to like stop you from, all right, I'm going to not freak out. You know what I mean? I'm going to take a second. I'm going to watch my tone, and really like focus on how do I communicate properly. Is that so? Are those the things that you're talking about that you help with coaching wise?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just want to mention, like, because I hear like almost a tiny bit of shame as you're talking about it, like that, it sounds like, well, I'm just learning how to do this. And like, and this is almost like a generational shift that we're experiencing. And you and I are the same age, right? And so I always talk about how millennial, we're that like micro generation between Gen X and the millennials. And that's really important because there is this like we were raised by people who behave very differently because frankly they knew less than we know now. When it comes to the workplace, we know a lot more about organizational psychology. We know a lot more about humans and how their brains work and how trauma works when it comes to work. And so I guess I just want to like acknowledge that and say like there are a lot of folks, especially folks that are our age, that are kind of struggling with that because we didn't have role models who were vulnerable most of the time, right? We didn't have those types of leaders ourselves. So, of course, we're just going to model what we were shown. And again, I was just very lucky because for whatever reason, my CEO, I worked at the scooter store, was just sort of like a diamond in the rough at the time. It was not normal the way that he ran our company. And I just got really lucky and then super interested in that type of work and like, how do we show up that way? So I think there's a lot of folks who are probably in their mid 40s to early 50s going like, oh, like how do I lead this way? And so yes, that's what I do is like first I help them recognize it and I help them recognize that it's not necessarily their fault. If you are just learning how to do this, but you're going to get so much more out of not only your employees and their experience, but your own experience when you can sort of recognize it and, I don't know, just show up gradually differently. It doesn't mean overnight you have to like figure it all out.
Gotcha. I
So,
love it. I love that. We also talk about marketing on this show a lot. And you're always curious to see how other people are marketing their business. So how do you market your business?
so I've been really lucky, to be honest, that the majority of like my coaching clients are referrals. They're word of mouth from the work that I previously did in the Agile space. I do get some coaching clients from speaking gigs, but the majority of the marketing that I need to do is around my podcast and is around my speaking. And like you had asked sort of about the vision of my business, and currently I would say I'm basically at like a 30-70 split where 70% of my business is coaching, 30% of it is speaking. And the vision of the business side of things is that I would really like to swap that. At some point, I would like to get to the point where I'm spending a lot more time speaking, reaching more people. And I will always coach because I never want to be the speaker that gets up on the stage and they haven't been in the workplace for 5 years.
Right.
So I will always coach. But the speaking has been sort of the biggest focus of mine in terms of business development and new business generation. And the funny thing is, I'm not great at it in terms of marketing. I just recently hired an assistant, so I will have a team starting in January, a team of
Congrats.
one. She's fantastic. Um, but the majority of my marketing has been conversations like this on folks' podcasts, my own podcast, where I get to meet tons of people, and that ends up, sometimes evolving into referrals to speaking opportunities. But a lot of it's just been really organic. I'm terrible at social media, which is why I have an amazing assistant starting. And yeah, marketing has just never been um, even as like I don't even have a ton of marketing clients, to be honest. So it's definitely a learning opportunity for me. But I also don't want to overmarket because I'm pretty full on the business side right now.
Right. Do you
So
how do you get you get your public speaking from podcasts?
some come through podcasts, some come again through referral and word of mouth. I am in the Agile space, what I would say is a known quantity. So a lot of my speaking gigs are Agile conferences that, folks just know me from Scrum Alliance.
Gotcha.
I've recently started to branch out of that and land speaking gigs outside of Agile. And a lot of those have also just come from different speaking associations. I'm part of the National Speaker Association and a couple other smaller ones. And so those come through that way too. It's really not a ton. I mean, I have an amazing website. Amazing, because I didn't do it myself. Um, so, I mean, I'm sure that helps too.
That's cool. The National Speakers Association, you said?
hmm It is a very, very incredible association.
I'm going to write that down because I do public speaking as well. Would like to, the National, can you write that down, Ethan? The National Association of Public Speaking. Sweet.
National Speakers Association.
National
NSA.
Speakers Association. The NSA. The NSA?
I know. It's
What?
funny.
All right.
They've been around for a long time. I couldn't even tell you, but I know some folks who have been in NSA since the 80s, and that
wow.
makes me feel like a baby sometimes.
Well, I will definitely look into it because, yeah, I'm trying to get in the public speaking circuit as well. So, Melissa, it's been an absolute pleasure. Can you go ahead and tell us where we can find you?
Sure. Find me, first of all, at melissaboggs.com. And I'm also fairly active on LinkedIn. You can just look up my name on LinkedIn, Melissa D. Boggs. And I have been fairly active on Twitter. I'm teetering on that these days a little bit, a little less active on Twitter, but I am still there. So if you wanted to DM me on Twitter, you can still find me. Yeah, social and my website. On the website, there's a place where you can shoot me a message. So I'm always open to getting messages that way too.
Fantastic. So you're looking for speaking engagements, and then you're also looking for business owner, CEO types that are looking for coaching on how to, well, you give me the pitch.
What I say that I do is I help leaders and teams bridge the gap between them. That is sometimes generational, societal, cultural. So yeah, I am here to help if that is what you need help with.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Spaghetti on the Wall, brought to you by LeDuc Entertainment for all of your digital marketing needs. Web design, video, editing, social media, whatever you got, we got it. And thank you guys so much. Please catch Spaghetti on the Wall anywhere where you can find a podcast. Spotify, Apple, and we'll see y'all next week.